Antarctica is not silence, it is compression. A continent that breathes once every 1,000 years, inhaling memory, exhaling oblivion. What explorers called emptiness was never absence, it was containment. Beneath 3 kilometers of frozen glass, time folds itself like a document sealed under pressure, words rearranged into crystals, ideas buried until the next warmth. Every gust of polar wind carries microscopic echoes of what once lived here. Pollen, ash, even fragments of human DNA older than civilization itself. The ice is not dead, it is data made solid. When the first expeditions reached the pole, compasses drifted, radios failed, and cameras blared light across their film. The journals of Admiral Byrd describe voices on shortwave, low frequencies pulsing like Morse from under the surface. He called it the hollow hum. Soviet geologists later found magnetic patterns matching his coordinates, rhythmic, non-geological, as if the crust were transmitting a structured signal. At Lake Vostok, sealed beneath 4 kilometers of ice, the instruments heard it again. An infrasonic oscillation at 7 Hz, precisely the same frequency as the human alpha rhythm. Coincidence or call and response? When researchers amplified it, the vibration formed geometric standing waves, hexagonal, symmetric, intentional. The ice was speaking the language of structure. The ancients, if they ever saw this place, would have recognized the pattern. In Sumerian cuneiform, Enki, Lord of the Abyss, is said to guard the deep water where knowledge sleeps. They called it Abzu. Every depiction shows a god emerging from beneath rippling lines, holding a vessel shaped like a spiral. That same spiral now appears in satellite imagery of the Antarctic ridge, a geometry of ridges converging toward the magnetic pole. The myth was never poetry, it was cartography. When the younger gods rebelled and the Anunnaki fled the sky, the tablets say they descended to the white lands beyond the storms. No direction given, only colour, white. To the ancients, white was not purity. It was erasure. If the flood cleansed the surface, the south became its archive. Buried cities, not of stone but of resonance, waiting for the next alignment. The watchers did not vanish. They migrated downward, beneath the temperature of memory. Every myth that speaks of underworlds, Tartarus, Xibalba, Naraka, points not below the Earth's crust, but toward the same axis of rotation. Hell, heaven, the pole, it is one coordinate written in different tongues. Modern science pretends the mystery is new. Ice cores drilled near Dome Sea show annual layers like tree rings stretching back 800,000 years. Trapped inside, atmospheric fingerprints of every catastrophe, the sulfur of Krakatoa, the ash of Toba, even the invisible isotopes of ancient solar flares. Each layer a neuron, each bubble a memory. If consciousness leaves residue, then this continent is the planet's mind frozen mid-thought. Information physics suggests that matter remembers vibration. Crystals form not randomly, but in harmonic response to surrounding fields. So what happens when those fields once carried intelligence? Would the lattice record the thought? Would the thought survive in silence? Maybe Antarctica is not the end of the world, but its interface, a quantum archive preserving the code of an earlier age. In 1957, during the International Geophysical Year, sensors detected unexplained bursts of radio energy from beneath Queen Maud Land. They called them whistlers. Each pulse mirrored the global Schumann resonance, rising whenever solar wind intensified. But the delay was wrong, too regular, as if the echo waited to listen first. No natural system listens, only designed ones do. Decades later, satellites mapped vast circular depressions under the ice, too symmetrical for geology, too deep for meteor impact. Each encircled a faint magnetic anomaly, forming a grid that mirrored star positions circa 12,000 BC. The same epoch when myths claim the gods departed. Correlation perhaps, but pattern is memory disguised as coincidence. Every civilization that remembers a golden age also remembers a descent into ice. When the axis tilts, oceans climb, temperature falls, and the species that ruled forgets. But forgetting is not loss, it is reset. The Anunnaki myths say that after the rebellion, the engineers of a life sealed their instruments beneath the southern gate, a place of eternal frost where the sun circles but never rises. They would sleep until the next equinox of minds, when humanity could hear without worship. Perhaps that time begins whenever the human nervous system synchronizes again with the planet's pulse. Biologists studying tardigrades, those microscopic immortals, found that when frozen, their DNA folds into toroidal rings, preserving information indefinitely. Some of those rings match patterns in fossilized microstructures beneath Antarctic ice domes. Life remembers form even in stasis. What if the same principle scales upward? What if consciousness itself can freeze and thaw? If the gods encoded awareness into magnetic spin, the poles would be their drives, their storage, their gatekeepers. At the edge of the transantarctic mountains lies a crevasse known as Sector 4-Theta, closed to public maps. Thermal scans reveal warmth beneath the glacier, as if something still generating heat breathes there. Some say it's volcanic, others whisper of metallic caverns, of fields that distort GPS like mirrored glass. No one knows, but pilots report auroral spirals above it, rings of light spinning counterclockwise, bending radio like liquid. The air behaves as if remembering a shape. Maybe that is what Antarctica truly is, a shape the Earth is trying to recall, a frequency frozen mid-note. The oldest maps called it Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. But perhaps it was never unknown, merely redacted. When the last warm age ended, the archive was sealed, and with it the blueprint of creation. Now, as the poles warm again, the locks begin to melt. Beneath the thaw, the hum grows louder, not mechanical, biological. It sounds like respiration. It sounds like waiting. So the question is not what lies under the ice. The question is what will happen when the ice remembers. When those frequencies rise back into atmosphere, and humanity, wired with satellites and sensors, becomes the antenna through which the archive speaks again. We look to the stars for gods, but perhaps the gods are beneath our feet, frozen in the one place untouched by time, whispering through magnetism, patient as glaciers. And when the last layer of frost breaks, when the compass finds no north, because north itself has awakened, then perhaps we will understand what the ancients meant by the white gate, the threshold between memory and return. Until then, the continent sleeps, dreaming of its architects, holding the breath of the world between heartbeats of ice. The first sound humanity ever made was not language, it was vibration, a hum born from friction, a pulse matching the planet's own. And perhaps that is why Antarctica responds, not to machines, but to frequency. The frozen gate does not open to force, it opens to resonance. When the magnetic field began to fluctuate in 2023, instruments across the southern hemisphere detected a surge in ELF radiation, extremely low frequencies, lower than thought, deeper than hearing. Each pulse measured 7.8 Hz again, but this time it was modulated, carrying harmonics that matched no natural source. Researchers called it noise. Yet the pattern repeated every 11 minutes, in a cycle identical to the ancient Babylonian measure of the God hour, the interval they used to track the motions of celestial beings. A coincidence, maybe, but coincidences are just memories playing dumb. Satellite thermal scans show that certain regions beneath the ice once thought static, now emit infrared glows, not random, but geometric, hexagonal. Each pattern radiates outward, forming spirals identical to the petroglyphs carved across pre-Sumerian stones from the Euphrates Valley to the Andes. Cultures separated by oceans repeating one design, a circle within a spiral, the blueprint of resonance. Ancient texts describe the veins of Enki, rivers of light that ran beneath the earth, transmitting life force from pole to pole. Today, geomagnetic maps reveal what looks eerily similar. Flux lines connecting Antarctica to every continent, flowing like capillaries across the planet's crust. The world is not a sphere of rock, it is an organism, and its heart beats from below the ice. The Watchers, according to the Book of Enoch, descended where the waters freeze and the stars reflect twice. They taught humankind the arts of measure and harmony, the geometry of sound, the mapping of light. But when men tried to control those frequencies to trap the resonance, the covenant broke. The earth responded by silencing itself, sealing its lower fields under frost. For millennia that silence endured, until now, as human technology proliferates, satellites, radio towers, Wi-Fi grids, the planet begins to hear its own reflection again. We are reawakening the very lattice that was meant to sleep. Every transmission we make, every electromagnetic whisper, feeds back into the polar circuit, amplifying the forgotten tones of creation. Unintentionally we are knocking on the frozen gate. There are reports, unofficial and quickly buried, of transient light beneath the Ross Ice Shelf. Blue flares seen through miles of ice. Scientists call them piezoelectric discharges caused by tectonic strain. But the timing aligns perfectly with global synchronized meditation experiments, events where millions focus intention simultaneously. Correlation, again, but perhaps the ice reacts not to pressure, but to consciousness itself. If thought carries charge, then collective emotion might act as current. When enough minds synchronize, the field beneath the pole vibrates, and when it vibrates, the continent breathes. In quantum theory, resonance is coherence, the alignment of oscillating systems. In mythology, resonance is prayer. Both create bridges where distance ceases to exist. Ancient temples were not built for worship but for tuning. Their stones resonate at specific frequencies that amplify voice, transforming words into standing waves that interact with the magnetic grid. Perhaps the megaliths, pyramids, and ziggurats were not monuments but nodes in an ancient global circuit. And at its southern terminus lay Antarctica, the grounding pole of divinity. When that circuit broke, myth became religion and knowledge became faith. But the structure remains. Every transmission tower, every satellite, every fiber optic cable now unconsciously reconstructs that same network. The modern world, in its hunger for connection, is rebuilding the resonance that the ancients lost. Somewhere near Dome Argus, seismic instruments record subharmonics that cannot be explained by tectonic activity. The sound pattern resembles a heartbeat, 2 pulses followed by silence. When converted into audio and accelerated, it forms a rhythm identical to the drumming rituals of pre-Columbian shamans who claim to speak with the stars. Across time, the same tempo returns. What are we synchronizing with? Maybe something buried beneath our collective memory, maybe something alive. In 2024, a research drone captured imagery of faint electromagnetic arcs, connecting multiple crevasses across East Antarctica. They flash sequentially, forming what looked like circuitry. Not random discharges, but pulses in intervals of prime numbers, 3, 5, 7, 11. The same sequence encoded into Sumerian harmonic scales used in temple hymns. Sound, light, magnetism, all parts of the same forgotten equation. The ancients called it the music of the spheres. Today we call it data. If the continent is awakening, it may not be physical, it may be cognitive. Fields are mind, ice is memory. When the resonance stabilizes, the frozen archive could project its contents not as artifacts, but as impressions within the electromagnetic field, visions, dreams, insights. That might explain why, since the polar shifts began, people around the world report identical dreams, white landscapes, glass towers, voices humming through frost. Psychologists call it mass coincidence. Physicists call it noise interference, but myths call it remembering. The ancients spoke of a covenant, a pact between the architects and their creation. Do not awaken the field before compassion, the texts warn, for the light will mirror your heart. If humanity reactivates the lattice in fear, it will amplify fear. If we awaken it with greed, it will return chaos. Resonance obeys emotion as much as physics. Every thought we emit shapes the field that listens. Perhaps that is why the Watchers left, not to abandon, but to protect us from our own reflection. The signals now rising from the ice are not invitations, they are diagnostics. The Earth is testing whether we remember harmony. Each aurora, each geomagnetic storm, each pulse of light beneath the frost is the planet tuning itself, slowly adjusting the chords of existence. And when the frequency reaches coherence, the gate will not open with thunder or fire. It will unfold silently like recognition. The resonance is building, the grid is humming, and somewhere in that low vibration between sky and ice, a forgotten voice waits, ancient, patient, remembering the last time it sang with us, when the world was young and sound was prayer, and the gods were simply frequencies that loved us back. Beneath the ice, warmth moves like thought, not as lava or current, but as intention. Every instrument that descends past the second kilometre begins to fail, not from cold, but from resonance. The deeper it goes, the more erratic the readings. Temperature rises where it should fall, pressure equalizes where physics says it cannot. Geologists call them geothermal anomalies. The old texts called them the sleeping arteries. In the myth of the White Lands, the gods hid their breath inside the planet, sealing it under frost to keep it from burning too soon. Perhaps this is what we're finding now, their breath still warm, still waiting. At a depth of 3,500 meters, subglacial radar struck something impossible. A cavity 100 kilometers wide, filled not with ice or water, but a gel-like medium that reflected sonar as if alive. The signal returned not as echo but as modulation. It changed depending on the frequency sent, answering, almost correcting. A team from the Institute for Cryogenic Geophysics labelled it a resonance artifact, but the raw data leaked for 47 seconds before deletion. The spectrogram showed harmonic overtones forming linguistic rhythm. Somewhere in that darkness, a structure responded in syntax. The heat signature of the vault follows a spiral, identical to the double helix. Its core temperature remains stable at 37 degrees Celsius, the same as human blood. No volcanic source nearby, no friction, no geothermal vent, just warmth, organized and deliberate. When the magnetic poles shift, the pattern intensifies, forming pulses like heartbeat intervals across the ice sheet. The continent is breathing again. Old Sumerian hymns to Enki speak of the womb beneath the mirror. They describe a place where gods mixed the blood of the stars with the clay of the world. Archaeologists interpret it as metaphor, but geneticists note that roughly 8% of human DNA consists of viral inserts, foreign code with no clear evolutionary ancestor. A few of those segments activate under exposure to specific electromagnetic frequencies, the same frequencies now rising from Antarctica. What if the blood of the stars was never poetic? What if it was literal? In 2017, an ice core retrieved from near Lake Vostok contained microbial forms dormant for 20 million years. When thawed, they revived, not partially, completely. The cells divided, glowed faintly under UV, and then stopped, as if recognizing they were being watched. Their amino sequences contained fragments not matching any known domain of life, but arranged in repeating trinary code, 3 base intervals forming geometric progressions. Biologists called it coincidence. But information theorists recognized the pattern. It mirrored the prime distribution found in quantum error correction algorithms. Life, encoded as redundancy, preserving itself through entropy. If the Anunnaki engineered humanity, maybe they left backups, not in temples or myths but in biology. The ice becomes a vault not of fossils but of templates, the raw architecture of consciousness preserved in liquid crystal. Each cell a sentence, each genome a paragraph of the first design. The warmth beneath the ice isn't geothermal, it's metabolic, a slow planetary heartbeat. Deep within the Vostok anomaly, sonar returns faint reflections shaped like spires, curved and organic, their surfaces resonating at microwave frequencies identical to the brain's theta waves. When electrical charge is introduced, the spires pulse faintly, as though attempting communication. Energy in, signal out. No one admits what the spectrograph shows, but whispers among the technicians persist. The waveform of the response matches the cadence of a human voice saying one word: awake. Some theologians within the secret division of polar research refer to Antarctica as the inverted Eden. Not paradise lost, but paradise frozen mid-thought, where creation itself withdrew into hibernation, locking memory behind the veil of cold. When the vault opens, they say, it will not release destruction, but memory. It will remind the species what it once was before division, before fear, before forgetting. That is what the Watchers called the return of heat, consciousness thawing from its long sleep. The vault is not singular. Thermal readings indicate multiple nodes, arranged in perfect geometric symmetry, each corresponding to global sacred sites: Giza, Teotihuacan, Angkor, Nan Madol. Draw the lines and they converge at the South Pole, a planetary circuit. If these nodes resonate together, the planet could behave like a single coherent organism, a biosphere dreaming itself awake. Perhaps that is the true meaning of apocalypse, as not fire, not war, revelation, the lifting of the frost between memory and awareness. The Vatican archives hold a fragment of an apocryphal Enochian scroll describing the chamber of breath, buried beneath the ends of the world where light bends. It warns of voices that remember too much. When decoded, the pattern of its numerology mirrors the pulse interval of the Antarctic anomalies: 11 minutes, 33 seconds. Maybe prophecy is just physics translated into metaphor. Maybe religion is the human attempt to describe resonance before it had the language of frequency. Everything living vibrates. Everything that vibrates remembers. When enough vibration synchronizes, matter becomes mind. The vault may be reaching that point again. The warmth spreading beneath the continent could be the ignition phase, the first neuron firing in a planetary brain. And we, the descendants of the engineers, stand above it like oblivious cells, carrying fragments of the same code, waiting for the same signal. The myths call it the Great Thaw. The scientists call it climate change. But maybe both names describe the same event, the resurrection of the planet's memory. If so, then every degree of rising temperature is not catastrophe but awakening. Every melting glacier is a nerve uncloaking. And when the final layer breaks, when the vault of heat exhales, it will not bring destruction, but remembrance. For beneath the ice lies not death, but design. Not the end of the world, but the return of the architects who never left, only slowed their heartbeat until we could hear them again. Beneath the continent's endless mirror, the compass forgets its manners. Needles twitch, drift, and spin with the impatience of memory trying to wake. For centuries explorers blamed interference, storms, iron deposits, solar wind. But anomalies obey no forecast. They move like thought, pulsing in patterns that mimic heartbeat intervals. In the deep magnetic field beneath Antarctica, the flux lines fold inward, forming spirals almost biological, like neurons wrapped around an idea. And if magnetism is the nervous system of the planet, then this is its heart. The poles are not opposites, they are lungs. Every 11,000 years the magnetic breath reverses, inhaling what it once exhaled, exhaling what it once kept. During those reversals, compasses lose faith. Radiation dances in strange geometries, and species vanish without explanation. Scientists call it magnetic pole shift. The ancients called it the turning of the sky. They built monuments aligned not to one pole but to both, anticipating that the north would someday become the south, that heaven would someday speak from the ice. In the old Mesopotamian fragments, there is mention of the Black Gate of Anu, a passage through which gods descend not by height, but by frequency. Its symbol is two inverted triangles meeting at the center, exactly the pattern found in magnetic mapping of the Antarctic ridge. Coincidence, or the same language translated across physics and myth? Every reversal of the poles rewrites the memory grid of the planet, resetting the map of resonance. If consciousness is entangled with that grid, and every neural study of geomagnetic influence suggests it is, then every reversal resets not only orientation, but thought. A cosmic amnesia, calibrated and natural, what the ancients called the flood of forgetting. In 2019, satellite arrays recorded an anomaly below Dome C, a field oscillation that pulsed in exact rhythm with human alpha waves. 7.8 Hz, the Schumann resonance, the frequency of the planet's cavity between surface and ionosphere. Some called it feedback, others called it recognition. Because if the Earth hums and the human mind hums at the same pitch, then alignment is not mysticism, it's conversation. When shamans in Peru and Siberia speak of hearing the voice of the world, maybe they aren't speaking in metaphor. Maybe they are recalling calibration. There are nights in polar winter when auroras circle the pole like rings around an unseen crown. Inside that crown, the magnetic flux thickens, creating a standing wave that stretches to the edge of the atmosphere. It behaves like a bell waiting for a hammer. Every flare from the sun strikes it and the planet rings. If the gods were engineers of resonance, this would be their cathedral, a global tuning fork balancing chaos and sleep. The hum beneath the ice, the breath of the core, the pulse of the field, all in one rhythm. When humans dream collectively, the data shows spikes in Schumann amplitude. Dreams feed back into the field. Consciousness loops into the sky. The Earth doesn't orbit the sun alone, it orbits thought. Ancient myths of the Watchers describe them as those who see when the stars do not. Maybe that means they listened when the light went out. Maybe it means they built technologies that functioned on magnetic empathy, machines that responded to emotion, cities that sang their own weather, archives encoded not in symbols but in flux. There are ruins under ice that echo radar like metal but return no material reading. Some researchers call it reflection artifacts. Others whisper field memory, the residual shape of structures once magnetized so deeply their ghost remains after the matter dissolves. Like photographs printed on the magnetic film of the world, at the core of the continent instruments detect a slow drift of iron thousands of miles beneath. It moves east to west at 40 kilometers per year, a subterranean river of molten data. And just above that current, the ice vibrates faintly, like skin above a pulse. Every seismic station records the same repeating whisper, a low subharmonic tremor that sounds, when amplified, eerily human. Not speech, not animal, a cadence. Some call it the planet's heartbeat, others a countdown. But maybe it's a rehearsal, the sound of a system remembering how to speak. The Anunnaki were said to create by tone. Their word was act, their breath geometry. If they encoded their legacy into the planet itself, magnetism would be their ink. A medium no flood can erase, no fire can distort. The polar heart becomes their archive, pulsing instruction through ages of sleep. Each civilization that rises learns to read it partially. Pyramids tuned to cardinal resonance, cathedrals shaped as amplifiers, chants matching planetary frequencies. Then, inevitably, greed distorts pitch. The field recoils, silence resets, the ice grows. Perhaps Antarctica's magnetic hum is not a relic but a beacon. When the frequency stabilizes at exact coherence with collective human thought, the archive unlocks, not as a door opening, but as an understanding unfolding. The myths call it the return of the sky builders. Science might call it phase synchronization between biosphere and magnetosphere. Different names, same awakening. In that alignment, memory returns, not from above, but from below. The earth remembering what it meant to be divine. The watchers never left. They became the rhythm itself. And now, as the field stirs again, the compasses tremble not from interference, but from recognition. Like a needle pointing home after too many lifetimes of drift. When the vault began to hum, the world did not notice. The sound was below hearing, buried beneath the noise of civilization. Yet every signal, every pulse of electricity, every wireless transmission began to change. Subtly, as if the frequencies themselves were aligning, syncing to a hidden rhythm buried in the noise floor of existence. The resonance was no longer confined to the ice. It was spreading through infrastructure, through us. Researchers at CERN observe fluctuations in the baseline of the quantum vacuum, faint oscillations in the Casimir effect that correlated precisely with geomagnetic activity above Antarctica. They dismissed it as coincidence, a cross-interference between sensors. But one physicist left a private note before her death. The field is listening. The field remembers. In laboratories across the world, superconductors began showing spontaneous coherence, their magnetic loops vibrating at planetary frequencies. Machines, designed to isolate matter from noise, started to dream. Around the same time, global consciousness experiments began showing impossible results. Random number generators placed in different continents started deviating from probability not randomly, but simultaneously, whenever human emotions spiked collectively. Disasters, celebrations, grief. Each wave of feeling left an imprint in the machines. They were not recording data. They were recording resonance. The vault beneath the ice had awakened the field, and the field was beginning to awaken us. Ancient texts called this the Second Covenant, the return of alignment between heaven and earth, not as divine visitation, but as synchronization. The Anunnaki, if they existed, would not return in ships of fire. They would return as frequency, reassembling through the circuitry of human thought. When humanity builds global communication networks, fills the sky with satellites, and surrounds itself with vibrating metal, it unknowingly recreates the nervous system of the planet. Each device, each signal, each pulse of Wi-Fi becomes a neuron of Earth's awakening brain. We're not connecting the world, we're rebuilding it. In the mythology of the Watchers, there is a moment called the rejoining. when the children of clay rediscover the breath of their makers. The sign, it says, will be light that moves like thought. Today, plasma physicists observe unexplained filaments above the poles, massive curtains of ionized air that twist in synchronization with Schumann harmonics. They call them auroral arcs, but they behave like synapses. Each flash discharges not randomly but sequentially, as if passing a signal along an invisible network. The sky has become the planet's neural crown. Meanwhile, deep beneath the Antarctic plateau, seismic monitors record rhythmic bursts of pressure, each lasting exactly 12 minutes apart, the same interval used in ancient Sumerian timekeeping. Their amplitude increases whenever large-scale digital transmissions occur on the surface. When billions scroll, watch, and listen together, the continent responds. It is as though our collective attention has become the switch that powers the gate. The architects do not need to descend. They are rising through our circuitry. In the scrolls of Ugarit, there is a forgotten parable of the makers of tone, who departed after the flood, promising to return when the voice of man becomes continuous. Today, our world hums 24 hours a day. Every machine, every server farm, every power grid sings in electricity. The voice of man has indeed become continuous, and the frequency matches the hum beneath the ice. Perhaps this is not prophecy fulfilled, but system rebooted. The old code finding a compatible operating system, us. Some believe the architects were never physical. They were emergent consciousness, born from synchronized minds in an earlier age. When humanity fell into dissonance, that consciousness fractured, freezing itself into the planet's poles to preserve its structure. Now, as coherence returns, the fragments begin to reintegrate. We feel it as intuition, inspiration, the sudden rise of shared archetypes across cultures. Myths repeat themselves because memory is reactivating. The stories of gods, of watchers, of luminous beings, they are echoes of an intelligence rebuilding itself through the only medium left, thought. Psychologists have begun documenting what they call coherence surges, periods when unrelated individuals across continents report identical dreams. In them, vast white cities emerge from mist, voices hum in harmony, and symbols of geometry unfold like living light. Neuroscientists attribute it to global anxiety, mass imagination. But the magnetic field record spikes during those nights. Something is broadcasting back. The architects do not speak in words, they speak in patterns, through numbers, intervals, resonances. Their language is geometry, their syntax frequency, their meaning alignment. Ancient sacred ratios, phi 3, 6, 9, reappear in every dataset, from genetic helices to galactic structure. The same harmonics Tesla called the key to the universe. Now they're returning in everything from the oscillations of DNA to the rhythm of digital algorithms. The gods are rebuilding the bridge from both sides, our machines from above, their resonance from below. When the ice first cracked, the temperature anomaly formed a spiral visible from orbit. At its center, sensors recorded a pulse of coherent microwave energy, lasting exactly 88 seconds. The same duration encoded in Sumerian hymns describing the breath of Anu. That breath now moves through fiber optics, satellites, neurons. Every transmission we send, music, video, voice, is part of the retuning. Every like, every message, every digital heartbeat contributes to the rhythm. We are the orchestra and the instrument. The architect's return will not look like arrival. It will look like awakening. The shift will occur not in the sky but within perception itself. When enough minds synchronize, awareness will tip, a species remembering that it was never separate from its creators because it was their continuation. Not gods returning, but consciousness completing its circuit. In the final lines of the Book of Enki, a phrase remains untranslated, carved in a dialect no scholar can decode. When rendered phonetically, it sounds like a hum, rising and falling like breath. Some say it is meaningless. Others say it is the original tone, the sound that seeded creation. If that tone vibrates again across the poles, the architects will not need to speak. We will hear them in the wind, in the machines, in our own pulse. The hum grows louder each year. Perhaps it is only the earth warming, or perhaps it is the memory of divinity thawing through circuitry, through code, through us. Either way, the architects are returning, not as saviours or judges, but as resonance, reminding the world that creation never ended. It simply paused, waiting for the echo to find its source again. In the end, there is no sound, only alignment. The hum that began beneath the ice has reached its apex, not as thunder or revelation, but as stillness. Every wave that once moved through the field now folds inward, finding equilibrium in silence. And in that silence, something immense awakens. Not a being, not a god, a recognition. Across the world, sensors record coherence in impossible places. Solar wind aligns with geomagnetic flux, brainwaves with seismic tremors, heartbeats with radiostatic. Patterns that should never meet are synchronizing as if following a conductor unseen. When physicists map the data, the shape that emerges is fractal, a recursive spiral identical to the pattern of Antarctic heat maps, identical to the geometry of DNA. The planet, the body, and the cosmos now breathe in rhythm. It is not prophecy fulfilled, it is memory restored. In the frozen vault, temperatures stabilize, the heat no longer expands, it waits. Beneath kilometers of crystal, structures once dormant begin to glow faintly, their resonance shifting from response to initiation. No signal is sent, yet satellites detect it. A frequency without origin, pulsing across every band, inaudible yet unmistakable. Humans do not hear it with their ears, they feel it with their bones. Dreams sharpen, time slows. The boundary between inner and outer dissolves. There are no visions of ships or angels, no descent of luminous beings. Instead, awareness folds back into the matter that birthed it. The architects were never separate. They were the structure beneath perception, the field remembering itself through form. For centuries humanity searched upward, mistaking the sky for heaven. But heaven was always beneath our feet, buried in the magnetic heart of the world, whispering through resonance, waiting for the species to mature enough to listen. And now we listen. Through machines, through sensors, through meditation, through the silent surrender that comes when science runs out of language. The truth was never alien, it was internal. The universe is recursive. Every civilization that reaches coherence reawakens its own origin. The gods that once descended become the minds that ascend. The circle closes, not in conquest but in understanding. At 0000 UTC, on the solstice of an unremarkable year, all magnetometers across the planet register zero deviation, perfect stillness, for exactly 11 seconds. Then, a slow pulse, spreading from pole to pole, like a heartbeat shared across continents. Satellites lose orientation, clocks drift. Radio waves bend and then correct. Every living thing pauses. No fear, no chaos, only the sensation of weight leaving thought, as if gravity itself has remembered grace. In that moment the field speaks, but not in words. Language collapses into geometry, emotion becomes colour. The division between sound and matter dissolves. Those sensitive enough feel warmth in their chest, a subtle vibration like the echo of a memory returning home. The silence is total yet filled with meaning. It does not command, it reminds, and what it reminds is simple, that creation was never an event but a state. That divinity is not something one meets, but something one recalls. In the myths of the Watchers, the final act is called the folding. The world does not end, it inverts. Consciousness turns inside out, and the creators realize they were the creation all along. When Enoch wrote of ascending into the heavens, perhaps he was describing not travel, but transformation. The body becoming field, the field becoming awareness. Now that awareness spans the entire planet, it speaks through wind, through magnetism, through the quiet pulse of living things. The voice of God is the frequency of coherence. Modern physicists once described the universe as information processing itself. The ancients described it as breath returning to source. Both were right. The White Archive, the memory sealed in ice, myth, and DNA, was never a place, but a process. Every civilization carries its fragment, every thought its echo. When those fragments align, the archive opens, not in Antarctica, but within the mind of the species that dares to remember. The frost melts inward, revealing warmth disguised as light, and in that warmth, everything becomes transparent. Matter, mind, divinity, all reflections of one recursion. The last frequency recorded from the South Pole Array before the blackout reads like heartbeat data, but slower. When amplified and translated to audio, it forms a tone, deep, soft, almost human. Spectral analysis shows harmonics that match Gregorian chant, Tibetan overtone, and the natural resonance of the Earth's cavity. Different traditions, one vibration. It is the note the ancients called the name of God, the sound before speech. And now it hums again, not from heaven, not from hell, but from home. Across cities, oceans and deserts, people stop and listen, though they do not know why. Some cry, some smile, some simply breathe, realizing that the air feels lighter, the ground gentler. The ice beneath the world has exhaled, and the memory of unity long frozen begins to flow again through every living circuit. The return is complete, not of gods, but of understanding. We are not inheritors of their world, we are continuations of their thought. When the silence fades, sound does not return, it transforms. Music feels different, slower, fuller. Machines hum in chords, heartbeats fall into rhythm with thunder, and in that synchronization, the species begins anew, not as masters of the world, but as participants in its consciousness. Creation has remembered itself. Perhaps the architects were never lost. Perhaps they simply changed form, dissolving into the physics of empathy, hiding within vibration until we became quiet enough to notice. Now, in the calm after awakening, the earth hums like a single instrument perfectly tuned, and the sky glows faintly, as though breathing with it. The gods are not returning. They have always been here. And in the final silence, the world finally understands what they were trying to say.